Hi, this is Mark Arnold with another Fun Ideas podcast. And today on the show, I have Beatles and Monkees fan extraordinaire, among other things, Ed Rising. How are you today, Ed?
Hey Mark, how are you?
I'm
Good to be
fine.
here.
So, where you hail from? You're from back east somewhere.
Yes, I'm from Long Island, New York.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a fan of all these wonderful 60s groups and other things.
Well, I was very lucky growing up in New York. First of all, my sister Nancy is a few years older than I, and so she was exposed to all the great music of the '60s, the Beatles, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, the Beach Boys, Jay and the Americans. We just lost Jay Black recently.
Right.
Then later on, the Monkees came in. And so it was funny. She always loved the Beatles until they got mustaches.
Yeah.
When they got mustaches, all of a sudden the Monkees took over her walls instead of the Beatles. And so I got a chance to listen to a lot of her 45s and then, of course, listen to 77 WABC Music Radio. Probably the best top 40 radio station ever, great DJs like Cousin Brucey and
Mhm.
Ron Lundy and Harry Harrison,
Mhm.
Dan Ingram, of course. And so I learned from a very early age from my sister that music is not just the backdrop of your life. It wasn't just wallpaper around you. It
Mhm.
was like oxygen. It was like water.
Hmm.
And so that's been with me my whole life.
Now, is she a fan from the very start, from Ed Sullivan on, basically?
I
That's
would say so. Yeah.
okay.
And she loves everything. Like she's more into American Idol or The Voice or things like that nowadays, and
Oh, okay.
listening to older stuff so much.
So she keeps current while we get stuck in the past. That's fine.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. She keeps going on.
So, I interviewed Kid O'Toole recently, and she has a podcast, or at least she's participated. I forgot if it's hers or not, but you also appear on it called Talk More Talk. Is that correct?
She does Talk More Talk with Tom Hundady, if I'm not pronouncing his name correctly,
Okay.
and with uh, Joe Mayo,
Hmm.
and of course Ken Michaels. And it's a bi-weekly podcast on the solo Beatles, essentially.
Hmm.
And I am not on the show.
Oh,
But I watch it every week and I comment and so
so
forth. And I
you've
enjoy
appeared on.
being
Oh,
yeah, I enjoy being on that. Yeah. Yeah.
that's very cool. Okay. All right. And when you became a big fan of all these groups, I mean, did you ever envision being a fan basically your entire life, or you figured that this would be something you'd grow out of? I could ask this about myself, but I figured I'd ask another fellow fan.
No, that's a great question, Mark, because to me, I think even early on, um, for instance, the Partridge Family was my first favorite group. That was the other groups, the Beatles, the Monkees, and so forth. They were my sister's groups.
Okay.
When the Partridge Family came around, that was my group. I had the Osmonds, I had Jackson 5, I had
Mhm.
the Partridge Family, David Cassidy. And I knew, even as a little kid, that this was going to be my favorite music for the rest of my life. And I just adopted the Beatles and the Monkees in the same manner.
Right. I did it kind of backwards, but I guess I did it forwards, but I mean, I did it backwards in the fact that, I saw Partridge Family and the Monkees when they were well, I didn't see Monkees when it was originally on. They were on Saturday morning reruns, but Partridge Family I did see new for the most part. And I don't know, maybe it was because I was just a little kid or something. I just didn't care or get it. I mean, as far as Partridge Family, Brady Bunch, totally a Brady Bunch fan, and didn't care too much about David Cassidy or the music or anything like that. In fact, I used to go so far as, that's not music or whatever, like most people do. Uh, and then became a true Beatles fan in the late 70s, about 77. About 1980 became a Monkees fan, and then after all that, then I became a Partridge Family fan and said they got some decent stuff, and Cassidy wasn't that bad of a vocalist, and he actually composed some good things. He's a halfway decent actor. He did some other things in his life. So yeah. But I experienced them all in order. It's just not from 64 to 74. It was more like 77 to 87 in that order.
Yeah, well, I think there's some similarity to
Yeah.
you. In the later 70s, I began to enjoy the Beatles music for itself.
Yeah.
Remember, the Beach Boys had their resurgence in the middle 70s.
Right.
Remember the Red and Blue albums and the big Beach Boy compilation albums that came out in the 70s. So I was exposed to all that. Elvis died in 77, and when he died, I had to have all his records or some of his records,
Yeah.
Things like that became part of what I would be exposed to. And then all of a sudden, yeah, right, about the Monkees, right. So the Monkees in the 80s,
Yeah.
early 80s, like 1980, when I first got my record or the club deal or whatever from the back of Rolling Stone magazine, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I bought all those albums fresh.
Right.
Then I became like, yeah, okay, so this is my music again, so. And then, of course, with the Beatles, I had a friend of mine in high school, and we were very good friends, good group of friends. And he was a huge Beatles fan, solo Beatles fan, and he pretty much introduced me or reintroduced me to a lot of the Beatles stuff and solo Beatles stuff. And I'd always listen to McCartney and some of the George Harrison singles and so forth, but I wasn't a huge fan.
Right.
But I guess with my involvement with my friends, it became a big part of my life.
Was there like one specific thing that made you a fan? Because I can tell you that for myself, that I knew about the Beatles prior to 1977, but there was a turning point at 77. So was there one for you?
Well, like I said, my friend would make mixtapes.
Okay.
And he would put mixtapes of Beatles stuff and solo Beatles stuff, and then a couple of Yoko Ono things in there. So you'd hear that one song where the tree falls in the middle of it or something like that. And I know this is just very bizarre or whatever you want to call it, avant-garde, whatever it was, but it was bizarre.
I think it's Touch Me is that one.
But I just kind of enjoyed it. And I just kind of enjoyed the whole experience of all the Ringo Starr stuff, the 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Wait, McCartney and Ringo sing that together, and it just blew my mind. And so as things just kind of kept growing and growing, and of course with Lennon's passing, or I shouldn't say passing, but his assassination,
right,
everything else just developed even greater after that,
Right. Yeah, for me it was I've said this on other podcast episodes, but I always repeat myself. It's like I was a comedy fan first, probably. I mean, I knew about the Beatles from the standpoint is my sister's a little bit older, like yours, and she'd point it out in magazines. She'd get the typical Tiger Beat 16 type magazines, and occasionally, even in the 70s, they run a picture of the Beatles, or at least one of them, or McCartney, or something. And she goes, "That's the Beatles," and I go, "Okay, whatever." My first exposure probably was Sesame Street, of all things, because I was there from day one, 69, and I heard the Muppets version of Yellow Submarine and Octopus's Garden before I ever heard Ringo sing them in the Beatles. So,
right.
But I was aware of those songs, and it helps for later in the story. The first song I ever heard that I know I heard, and this was in the early 70s, probably late 60s, I don't know, because I was pretty young. I was born in 66, was probably Come Together, because I really remember that distinctive, like, whatever that he says shoot me or just shoot at the beginning, where he's a shoot, and it stuck in my brain. And we used to go to this restaurant called the Giant Artichoke. I haven't told this story before much. In the early 70s, like 70, 71, 72 or whatever. And it seemed like every time we went there, they'd be playing that song. They probably had like a cassette tape or something, and they played it over and over and over. I didn't know it.
Right.
But, it might have been the radio, but, they certainly liked that song because, or at least that was the one that stuck in my mind. I go, that's a pretty interesting song. Had
well,
no
if you
idea
look at
the Beatles. Well, yeah.
I'm not sure if you call it a hook or whatever, but that first beginning of that song, that shoot, and then Ringo's drum roll.
Yeah.
I mean, that does take you right in,
Right.
And so, that definitely could see that happening. The funny thing you mentioned about Sesame Street is that they had tremendous. I mean, in the early years, my little sister was my little sister was a little kid during that time, and my younger brothers,
Mhm.
and they all watched it, and so I watched it with them,
Yeah.
and I was very impressed with the music and just the whole production back
Hmm.
then, and how they incorporated was it Rubber Ducky and things like that into. So it was good stuff.
Well, they had
Mm.
very good songs. I mean, if I had a group that I was following or a music that I followed, it was certainly the songs by Joe Raposo. You know, he was probably my first person I followed, but I didn't know it was him. I mean,
Mhm.
I just like the Sesame Street music, and then
Yeah.
secondly, maybe Mr. Rogers and things like that. And he composed his own stuff, so that was my earliest stuff. But going back to the Beatles thing, the first song I remember hearing on the radio, and I didn't
Hmm.
know it was Beatles related or anything, was Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey, and that one by Paul McCartney and Linda. That one has that hook, again is it's like hands across the water, and so I'd always remember that, never knowing it was called Admiral Halsey. I thought the
Right.
song was called Hands Across the Water. I didn't know,
Right. Right. Right.
and so you flash forward a few years, and then this is where the story where I normally tell it is. I was a big fan of Monty Python already. My dad loved comedy, and so even in the early '70s, I had seen Marty Feldman on TV and Monty Python as soon as they came out over here. Rather than in England, my dad watched it first because it was on pretty late, and then he finally let me stay up to start watching it. Became a total fan. Saturday Night Live came out, became a total fan, and Eric Idle hosted once, and well, he hosted a couple times, but the first time he hosted, he came out and he did his rendition of "Here Comes the Sun." So you probably have seen this somewhere along the line,
Probably. Yeah.
and he plays the guitar and just goes brum. Here comes the sun, and he just shouts it out like that. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. And then somebody comes in, Jane Curtin or one of the others says, Eric, this is a really good song. You should save it for the end of this show, which basically meant you suck, get off the stage. And so he goes, oh, all right, all right. So we introduced Joe Cocker. He was like the guest star. And so we went on. And, so I'm watching this thing and I go, that's got to be a real song. He can't be just making up something that
Yeah.
strange like that. Maybe was, but I asked my parents. I said, "Is that a real song? What is that?" And he goes, "Oh, that's Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles." And I go, "Really? Can I hear the real version?" He goes, "Yeah, we actually have the album over there in the rack." And I go, "Oh, okay." So I took the record rack out of the record rack, and I had seen the album because I knew my parents' records, but I never played that one. It looked like, ew, adult music. It wasn't kids music like the Sesame Street.
Right. Right. Right.
And I go, "There's no name on this. Who is this?" Because it had him crossing the street, but there's
Right.
no name
Right.
on the
Right.
front. And I just thought it was really weird. And it's like, who are these long-haired people? I don't know. So anyway, I pulled it out and I go, "Oh, an apple. That's pretty cool." And then I put it on, and I put it on side two first because Here Comes the
Here
Sun
comes the
was on
sun.
side
Opens the
two.
album.
So I play it and I go, "Oh, I've heard this song. That's a really cool song.
Yeah.
I wonder
Yeah.
what else is on this album." And so I flip it over and then I play and it's Come Together. And I go, "Oh my God, it's the same
Right.
song
Oh
that I
my
used
God, mine is blown.
to." And then the next song was something. And I go, "I've heard this song too. I don't know where I've
Right.
heard it, but probably on the radio or something." Um, what's the next song? It's like "Oh Darling" or something. I don't remember.
Is
But
it Octopus's Garden?
no, that's the fourth song. That's what I said. The third
Maxwell
song,
Silverhammer then.
yeah, yeah, and I go, "Oh, that's cute." But then Octopus's Garden came out. I know that one too, and
Right.
it's like, and then I listened to the rest of the album, and I didn't really know much of the rest of them. But the fact was, I said, "This has four big songs on it. This can't be right. It's not a greatest hits," because I figured, most people would do a record album with like one good song and the
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah.
And I didn't know the Beatles' history from anybody that they were better or greater or tried to do better or, had this following. I knew nothing about that. I just knew that they existed and that they broke up. and that's about it. And
Yeah.
everybody wanted them together, but then everybody wanted even the Partridge Family back together. So who knew? It's like if they were better or greater. And so I said, do we have any other records? The only other thing we had was we had a 45 of Help, and so I played Help and I'm Down for, and so those were my like go-to records, but I wanted more, and
Hmm.
eventually got all the other albums and everything, and rest is history. But it's like that
So
was,
essentially, you had younger parents. My parents were already close to 40 uh, around the time that I was listening to. I mean, by 1966, my father was 40. So he wasn't going to be listening to Elvis
yeah,
or the Beatles. They were all talking about swing music and big band
yeah.
and so forth. And
My parents were 5 years apart, and so in 1977 my mom would have been let's see, 50, 30, 63, 73. She would have been 34, and my dad would have been
okay,
30, 39.
right,
But
right.
that 5 year gap could have been like a 25-year gap, because my mom always tried to keep up with current music, especially after I grew up a little bit. When I was a
Hmm.
little baby, because I asked her, it's like, why didn't you go to the Beatles concert? And it's like, we're busy raising you kids, or I was pregnant with you,
Sure.
or whatever. It's like I wasn't going to go to a Beatles concert,
Right, right, right.
but and my dad was like, here's my dad with music. He was working at a TV station in 1956 in Bakersfield, and they showed some clip of Elvis Presley as the new singing sensation, and he probably sang something like Heartbreak
Hound
Hotel
dog.
or something, yeah. And he was swinging his hips around, and my dad says, "Who is this hillbilly?" And you know, my dad's only a couple years younger than Elvis. He's still around, but it's like he just thought the guy was just some crazy hillbilly, singer goofball. He didn't have any interest at all. And my dad always was like more into the big band and jazz and
Yeah,
maybe Sinatra a little bit, but more into like that type of music. He'd
yeah,
probably,
yeah,
he never really collected music, but if he was listening to something, I bet he was listening to Take Five or something by Dave Brubeck or something like that, rather than, anything to do with pop music at all.
yeah.
And so, I asked his opinion about the Beatles, and says, they were around for a while, and then they went away. My mom was like,
Yeah.
yeah, my mom was like, oh yeah, they were pretty cool, and they still make music now, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Um, and a funny story about that. So after this enlightenment about the Beatles, I only knew the Beatles. So my mom at my next birthday or whatever bought me a single of "With a Little Luck" by Wings, and I basically said, why the hell did you buy me this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And she
yeah,
goes, well,
yeah,
look who wrote it. And I go,
yeah,
oh, it says McCartney. Oh, okay, one of the Beatles. Okay. And so she goes, well, play it. And so I go and play it. It just happened to be a number one tune, but with a little luck, I just didn't know it, because
yeah.
I wasn't registering current singers and songs. I just hear stuff on the radio. I
Right.
became I became a bigger knowledgeable fan about music and who did what after that. But that was like a big wake up call to go, oh, okay, so I guess they do have hits currently. They're just not in the Beatles anymore.
Right. And then no, like remember when Band on the Run came out, and that was the big record,
Yeah.
huge record. I mean, I think the other records that he did previously were okay. I remember My Love being a hit record and Uncle
Mhm.
Albert and so forth.
Yeah.
But and as I mentioned previously, and I knew of the songs that George had, and the Ringo album was huge, you know.
Yeah.
And but I wasn't exactly, I would say, a huge fan. I just knew that I was aware of the Beatles. I knew who they were, and I was glad that they had records still, you
Hmm.
know. And then all of a sudden, with the Partridge Family fading out, I had to find somebody else.
Hmm.
You know, like I said, Elvis became something that I got into. I got into Beach Boys. I got into Barry Manilow. Barry
Hmm.
Manilow became a huge uh, uh, artist that I still love.
Hmm.
And but I jumped on the Paul McCartney bandwagon at that point. I
Hmm.
said, no, this is the guy that's the next David Cassidy. If you really, I mean, I know how sacrilegious that is.
In that
But,
order.
you know, talking about going backwards and forwards and whatever.
This McCartney fellow better
Oh,
watch this Cassidy fellow. He's got a few things to,
unbelievable. But yeah, that's honest. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
And you know, and then the Monkees, you know, as I always loved the Monkees, and I love the sound of that. And and so yeah, so by the time the '86 tour came around, I was nuts. I could not believe what happened with that 1986 season.
Yeah.
When all of a sudden, the two greatest things happened in my life. The New York Mets, my favorite baseball team, had their greatest season, totally dominating the whole year long. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, I had the Monkees, and the Monkees are on MTV. And I told my boss, I had just been with my job a couple of years, and I didn't have a VCR yet, and barely even had cable. I don't think I even had cable yet. And so go to my boss, says, you got to tape all the Monkees episodes that are going to be on, because they're doing a marathon. Can you do that for me? And he's looking at me like, the Monkees? And he's, he grew up in the 60s, and so he knows who they are. Yeah. All right, well, I'll try. And then he did the same thing for me with Live Aid.
Yeah. I did that myself on Live Aid, but yeah.
But it's just funny. Just a funny association that I have with the Monkees with my boss.
Right.
And anyway, and then they have the big hit record that was Then This Is Now. And it just blew my mind. This was all over there again. And I got a chance to see them in concert, Mickey, Davey, and Peter. And I saw them twice at Jones Beach. I brought my youngest sister to see them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was just great. And ever since then, I've been like Monkees nuts. As Plastic would say.
Now, were you a fan of the Monkees originally? I mean, or was that your sister's group?
Well, like I said, she was she was a fan originally.
Yeah.
And then I would watch the TV shows, maybe more so on the Saturday reruns or after school reruns. So I like to think of myself as a first generation because it's more prestigious. But I probably picked it up in the aftermath of
right. I like to say them first generation, but I wasn't born until December of '66, so the show had been on for 4 months. But I think if it's anything before Dolenz Jones, Boyce, and Hart, you're a first generation fan, because the contract was supposed to last till '73. They were on Saturday morning through '73, so it's like the people who say I was a first generation fan. What, a generation is only 2 years? It's like usually it's 20 years, folks. But,
right.
Yeah,
that's right. Very good point.
Yeah.
But,
And I didn't know, when I used to see him on Saturday morning, I mean, I've told this before, so I won't say it again, other than I didn't care for him that much back then, but I didn't know there were new rerun shows from the 60s. I thought it was brand new stuff. I had no idea. It's like, it was just stuff on Saturday morning, so I watched it,
Mm-hmm.
But I became a fan because of Nesmith, because he did that show Television Parts in the early 80s. And I said, maybe I need to investigate this stuff a little bit further. And so that's when I, slowly became a fan. And so by the time they actually did reunite, which I never thought would happen, I agree with you. Now here we are, look at where we are, but at the time in '86, I thought they'll never reunite, because I think I read, it was in Lefkowitz's book, it was like they tried to do a McDonald's commercial and they couldn't come to agreement, and like Peter Tork didn't want to do it because it's advertising eting meat, and
yes.
Nesmith didn't think there was enough money in it or something, or he just was too busy or whatever, and so it never happened. And so, knowing Beatles history, I figured, well, they're never going to get together again either,
Right.
And '86, well, they did get together. In fact, all 4 of them did, at least on one performance. So I said, okay, well, we can see. It's too bad all 4 of them did get together a little bit more often, but at least they did. So looking back, at least,
I mean, they did a couple of shows where Nesmith did the encore. I think it's the '86 tour and '89 or something like that.
Yeah.
And just it bothers me that in 2011 Nesmith declined to join them, but I think he was having lawsuits with Pacific Arts and PBS at the time.
Yeah.
And that's just makes me sad, because then Davey dies,
Yeah.
and
I've heard different
No.
stories on that. I've also heard that the other three didn't want him, or at least Davy and Peter. Mickey seems to go along with everything, but
Yeah.
I've heard that Davy and Peter were kind of like, well, we have this polished act, and we don't need interlopers, But it's like, come on, guys, it's
Well, to be
Nesmith.
honest with you, I
Yeah,
mean, look, Peter Talk is a talented guy. He's
yeah,
is an important part of the Monkees. But if Peter wants something, you know what? Let's see what Davy and Michael wants and Mickey wants. And then if you want to go along with that, then that's fine and dandy
yeah,
with me. But the other guys are the talent in the group
right.
as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
And I know that Davy had a bit of an ego. They all had egos, I
right.
imagine. But as you said, mentioned, I had read that, they had their talent, their show in one way, and they didn't necessarily want to have to be having some of their songs dropped,
Right.
which I guess would have been Talk in that case, because he would have had 3 or 4 songs dropped at least
Right.
to do a show. And you know what? If I'm Peter Talk, I should be happy making the buck. And I'm sorry, it's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, apparently none of them ever really turned their nose at it too much. I mean, it's kind of funny, since I did that headquarter book with Michael Ventrella and went over their solo careers. I mean,
Yeah,
all of them did quite a few things outside the Monkees, but that almighty dollar brought them all back over and
sure,
over again. So I mean,
right.
whatever they were doing, be it Godspell, being directing British TV shows, doing cartoon voiceovers, apparently didn't make it as much money as just being a monkey,
No,
or
and it,
maybe they actually had some fun doing it. So
well, I'm sure there was a combination of both. In my
yeah,
opinion, I think Davy Jones was so poorly marketed or managed or whatever.
yeah,
It's just horrible that this man just never really got a variety show. I mean,
yeah,
he did a show on the BBC, I think it was, or
yeah,
British TV. It was a TV special, and
yeah,
that never became bigger than that. I
right,
mean, that's just with all the Tony Orlando and Dawns and Casey and the Sunshine Band and God knows who else,
yeah,
Johnny Come Lately, whatever variety show, that Davy
right,
Jones wasn't either have his own show or be a regular guest on these shows.
yeah.
That's a shame.
I always found it amazing, yeah, to go down that path. I always found it amazing that none of them really had too much television success after that, apart from the Monkees. I mean, Nesmith's television parts, which I mentioned, only lasted a handful of episodes, and you'd think that that would have been, you know, a little bit more successful, maybe not a runaway hit, but I mean, it's like,
Yeah,
even if with you didn't think about the Monkees connection, I mean, there was some actual genuine funny stuff on that show.
it was, and it was.
Yeah,
And the funny thing, when I remember seeing that, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this guy was funny. He was in the Monkees. He was funny,"
yeah,
and I kind of made me feel good. I remember he had that Rio hit record,
yeah,
and I remember there's some bits on that's kind of fun to listen to.
yeah,
And then he did the elephant parts, and I was
yeah,
like, this could be great. And I think it's just the fact that he was a little too soon. I mean,
yeah,
he was the pioneer, and if he had done it 2 or 3 years later, maybe MTV would have picked it up.
yeah.
You know?
I was saying maybe he could have gotten it on like HBO, and maybe made it slightly more adult if that had to be that well. But I'm thinking
Yeah,
about, like Curb Your Enthusiasm, which has been on HBO for 2 decades.
yeah,
That he could have gone down that path had he
yeah,
chosen to. Of course, he may never have done Monkees reunions, but if he did a television parts show where he did a few episodes every year,
yeah,
just for
yeah.
fun, you
Sure.
know. But it is kind of surprising. I agree with you on Davy Jones never having a variety show. Mickey is kind of an enigma to me. It's almost like for a bit after the Monkees, he was trying to be more of an actor. And then after a few years, oh, I did some Adam 12s, I did, Medical Center or something. I don't know. Then he just got, whatever, and it's probably because maybe he didn't need to do it. I don't know. And so, yeah, and his record career was really bizarre.
Right.
And he just put out a smattering of singles. I would have thought somewhere along the line he would have put out a solo album long before he eventually did. And when he did, he put out a couple children's albums, which actually sound like just regular rock and roll albums for adults. But to gear them towards children was an odd choice too.
Yeah, it was very odd. And I remember seeing, granted, he did have the directing career in England.
Yeah.
But as far as the performance, I remember seeing his 70s solo stuff, and I couldn't get over it. I said, this man has such a great voice.
Yeah.
Why is he making these kind of records?
Yeah.
And why, and that Vicky push it asleep. I had no interest in even listening to it. I was just, they're so disappointed in the choice.
Yeah.
So it's just weird how they, whether it's the entire entertainment industry, as how they view the Monkees, or whatever. It was just disappointing because I think he's just one of the great talents.
Yeah.
And maybe, as you say, he kind of is more affable than other people, and he's less worried about having his name being brought up there. And who knows?
Yeah. And then the other thing on Davey is like, maybe he just had such a bad experience with Bell and MGM that he didn't want to try to get, or maybe he did try. I don't know. That's the part of the story. I don't know if he tried to get a record deal and was too demanding. It's almost like nobody was interested would probably be more likely.
He could have been on Broadway.
The fact that he had to self-press his records and stuff like that, and which seems bizarre.
I know some of those records are pretty good. Some of them are pretty awful.
Yeah,
but they're because there's no production. It's just him sitting there with an acoustic guitar for most of those. Was it Just Me or whatever it's called?
Yeah.
Just for the record.
Just Me.
It's pretty.
Well, Just for the record is a 4-disc set, or
yes. It's I mean, it's an incredible thing to listen to, and that brings up another point that I'd like to make.
Sure.
It's getting to the new albums that were released in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
The Good Times album.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell happened? Where there's nothing from Davy Jones on there other than an old song from 1969.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the vault. There's nothing from the Just for Me, or Just for the Record collection that they could have said, we want to use those songs and do like a freeze a bird,
right,
kind of a thing, and rewrite the music around it and other vocals around it, and give Davey a couple of tracks on this album.
Yeah. Well, that was my complaint when I did Plastic EPs, and I think I talk about it in my other Monkees book, Plastic EPs episode about the Good Times album. It's like, okay, if you had to just pick a Monkees song and you couldn't go into Davey's solo stuff and do a Free as a Bird thing like you're talking about, or Real Love or something like that, why did you pick a song that has been released at least twice before? So it's not, I mean, you might as well have just done Daydream Believer and slapped it on there if you're going to just do that. I mean, I didn't expect him to pick, like You Can't Tie a Mustang Down or something really obscure like that. But, there's stuff that they didn't put on those Missing Link stuff that they could have used. I mean, or even stuff that was put on there that, they could have enhanced and made better, it seems like, so that Davey was involved in. But I don't know, maybe it was an afterthought. I don't even know. That's a Sandoval type question. Unfortunately, the producer is no longer with us, so we can't ask him. And, but it almost seems like that. It's like, don't you think you should put Davey on here? Yeah, I guess so. It's almost like, I don't know.
Then they have the follow-up Christmas album. Yeah. Then they did it, and that's just maybe that answers our question here.
Yeah.
Because then they put Mele Kaliki Maka is a wise way to say Merry Christmas to you. The worst Christmas song of all time.
But he does a decent job, I will admit.
It's the most cringe-worthy song ever. I mean, Bing Crosby gets away with it because Bing Crosby can get away with anything.
Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know. I mean,
I actually think Davey got away with it. Is it the greatest song ever? No, I agree with you. But I think Davey got away with it because Davey and Mickey, their strongest points is they were able to sell a song to us listeners, you know, I mean, Davy's a perfect example from being able to sell something like the Day We Fall in Love, which is always maligned as being awful and everything like that. But if you're like a 10-year-old girl or whatever age, a 7-year-old girl listening to this, that's like gold. That's like,
Oh, an 8-year-old
Davy's
boy. I
singing
mean, I'm
for
sorry, I
me.
liked it.
So, and yeah, it doesn't become smarmy and tacky until you get to be 40, 50, 60 years old, and then you start saying, what is this crap? But then you realize, oh, that wasn't written for me.
Actually, 18. I'm like, wait a minute, what am I listening to here? What is this? I'm gonna skip those tracks.
Because you mentioned Elvis. Elvis had "Are You Lonesome
Oh,
Tonight,"
please.
and then there's the spoken word part in that. I mean, and nobody sits there and says that's the worst Elvis song. Usually they say it's one of the best. So it's like,
I've always liked it.
Yeah.
And point me in the direct, not point me, but doesn't somebody want to be wanted? By the Partridge Family. David Cassidy hates the song, and he just absolutely goes down. He'll be in concert, and sometimes he'll be a little bit not all there when he's in concert, and he'll start that song, and he'll have to go on about 20 minutes about how awful this record is, and how I had to sing this, and how this was the worst thing that I ever had to do in my life, and it ruined my life. And thank you very much.
And yet he'd sing it every time. So I don't know.
It's crazy.
So let's talk a little bit about the Partridge Family. We've done enough Monkees right now. It's like, so I'll tell you my quick story because it was just something that was on. I watched it and they played music and I didn't really think about it. So I was only like 3 when it first came on the air, and it was like 7 when it was off the air. And so I just noticed that there was kids on it. There was a family that sang. I thought Mrs. Partridge was kind of pretty, and that was about it. But I didn't collect anything. I didn't get into it. Other people my age kind of did, but it just didn't phase me till, like I said, years later. So you're a fan from day one, or even before day one?
Even before day one, because if I remember correctly, at the end of the summer of 1970, I Think I Love You was released.
Okay.
I have to go back and look at the actual dates, but my memory tells me that it was a hit record. Or at least it was a hit record. Went to number 1 in November 1970. So probably wasn't maybe October or September I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
And by November, it was a double play on WABC 77 Music Radio. And I loved pop music from at that point anyway. So I was listening to the top 40 radio. And so all of a sudden there was this TV show about this family that played, and that blew my mind, and I loved the fantasy of it, and I loved the idea of it. And I thought they all played, of course. I'm 9 years old, and I thought this is the greatest thing, and I thought Keith and the whole group of them were just terrific.
Yeah.
And of course I was a Brady Bunch fan also. So the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family, the 2 greatest families of all time, back to back every Friday night.
Yeah.
And so I loved that, and of course then I got the records and the albums and the fan club stuff and magazines and whatever.
Did you join the fan club?
I sure did.
Oh, cool.
I did.
You still have anything from it?
No.
Oh.
No.
Not even the record. Didn't they have a little fan club record?
A little plastic like a vinyl. I wouldn't even call it a vinyl record. It was just like a piece of saran wrap or whatever.
Yeah. One of those plastic sound sheets that are flip floppy. Yeah.
And and I have great memories of that.
Yeah.
And things like that. So I mean, I enjoyed that, and I remember when they changed the Chris Partridge. They had to recast Jeremy Galbrax, and he had been booted off the show, and they replaced him with Brian Foster. That was a huge deal. That was a huge deal. Oh my God, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Didn't make a damn bit of difference, but I always liked Jeremy Galbrax. I thought he looked more like David Cassidy, and so they looked more like brothers. But then again, Brian Foster looked a little bit more like Shirley Jones. So fine, whatever.
I think it's funny because I didn't know anything of the history of the group, but I knew that that character changed, and but the rumor always was that Jeremy Gelbucks died.
Oh, that all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
And I had no idea. And I thought, oh, that's too bad. He was such a young little cute kid. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
then it finds out years later, no, not true. He's still around now. So it's
Still
like,
around now.
whoops. And it was just a simple matter, if I remember correctly, that his family wanted to move and they didn't want to be in Hollywood anymore. And it's like, they weren't going to fly him in each week. It was easier to get another kid because all his basic lines of delivery were, who? That's what I heard.
The point is that he was. I thought that he had a certain quality. I call it a
Yes,
star
actually
quality.
does.
There was an episode that's centered around his character, and I thought he was quite good. But unfortunately, his situation with his family was what it was.
Yeah.
We have a new Chris. The
Yeah.
records kept on coming. I Woke Up in Love This Morning was a huge hit.
Yeah.
Every one of those early records, those first 4 or 5 records, was huge. It was a big deal.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it stopped.
Yeah.
The radio wouldn't play them. You couldn't go into a store and find them. It became and of course by the time you're 13 or 12,
Yeah.
your older friends or maybe your friends around you are saying, well, they're not cool anymore. You want to listen to Grand Funk Railroad or whatever other crap it was that was going on the radio. You have to move on to other things. And I would still be looking at teen magazines and stuff. So I had to took a little while for me to grow up.
So those records, like what are the last ones? Crossword Puzzle and Bulletin Board and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You couldn't find even then.
Okay, so this is a great story.
Okay.
I think it's a great story. 1973. I'm at the amusement park with my friends. All of them are girls. And so there you have the various arcade games that you can play. And spin the wheel and win this and whatever. And so I'm looking at one of the games, and it's all these record albums. And right in the center of the albums is the new Partridge Family crossword puzzle album. So I zero in on that, and I get all excited. And my friends around me, they were saying, "Oh, Ed, don't ever, if you ever win this thing, you cannot get that album. You just cannot do it, and we'll never talk to you again, or whatever else." So use peer pressure. So sure enough, I managed to win an album. So now it's like, what am I going to take? So my friends are like, they're flipping out. So I ended up getting the Edgar Winter album. I had no idea who the hell Edgar Winter was, other than that he made Frankenstein.
Yeah.
It was a really great record.
Mhm.
But here's this woman, I'm imagining, in white blonde hair and some get up, revealing his or her breast, or I'm not sure what Edgar Winter was. I don't know too much about him. But anyway, it was just weird as hell to even be looking at this thing. I can't even hold this thing without flipping out. Who is this thing? Okay, but at least my friends will talk to me. So yeah. So yeah, this is definitely peer pressure. Definitely played a part in how I had to evolve musically. That's why Paul McCartney saved me.
Okay. So did you ever go back and get those albums? Crossword Puzzle?
Yeah, when I got that Columbia House or whatever it was, the
you already did that
record deal, I got everything. Boom.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yep. Monkees, Partridge Family. Boom.
Because I never thought about it. I knew that the Monkees had records only because I saw the cereal box ones around. I saw Jackson 5, but I was pretty ignorant on how records worked, and so
Honeycomb.
I never thought about Partridge Family having actual records, even if they sang on the show. I didn't know the Brady Bunch had actual records either, but they did, but I never saw
They
them.
actually sang.
Yeah. But, it wasn't until years later, and I started thrift shopping because that was my easiest way of getting cheap records. And it's funny, in like the late 70s when I used to do that, you could find so many copies of the first 4 Partridge Family albums, especially the first album, just stacks and stacks of these things. It's almost like everybody just got rid of that and the First Family by Von Meter en masse. They just said, we're done with this. stuff, and it's going to go to the thrift store. And so for years I'd be going through the bins looking for Beatles stuff, and I'd see like Partridge Family album, Partridge Family album, up to date, up to date, up to date, Partridge Family. It's like, where's the Beatles albums? There's got to be something here. And I'd eventually find some, but it's like
Yeah.
Partridge Family. It got to the point for me. It's like eventually I said, these are in really decent shape. And I looked in the copy of the Partridge Family album. It had the book cover in it, the poster in it, the
Yeah.
picture in it. It was the book covers in the second one. And I said, I should buy these just to have them. It's
Yeah.
like, and I found the shopping bag with the shopping bag. I found, I don't think there was anything in the third album, but it's like, but it's like I just started buying them just to have them. And I didn't really play them, although I did know I Think I Love You by that time. And I said, well, that song was pretty good, but the rest of it, and by the time I had revisionist thinking about the Monkees, liking all their music and everything, I said, well, the Partridge Family is like the obvious successor, because I mean Bell is basically a successor to Coal Gems, and so let me give it, and they kind of marketed them the same way, and they had the kind almost
Well,
like
some of the same songwriters too.
They had almost the same fate. The first album, the first 3 or 4 albums did really well, and then it was all downhill after that. And so I said, but that doesn't necessarily mean the quality went downhill. It just meant that the people buying records stopped buying them.
Right. Well, if you listen to the shopping bag record,
yeah,
I just happen to think that's the most melodic of all their records. And so I enjoy that even more now than I did, 40, 50 years ago,
Yeah.
But no, that's good stuff.
Yeah. And I think both the Monkees and Partridge Family actually improved over the years, believe it or not, and I agree with you. Shopping Bag, Notebook's a pretty good album, and things like that. Probably their weakest album might be the aforementioned Bulletin Board, but then Changes was probably the weakest album of the original Monkees album.
Yeah.
So
now I like Bulletin Board. Of course, they try to bring in some different sounds. I'm not too much of a fan of Notebook.
Yeah.
But then again, I think the overall production of Notebook makes it feel kind of cheap.
Yeah.
I always joke around about calling it the Partridge Family White Album. And it's got a couple of tracks on there. There's one song on there in which it's as long as you're there, I think is the song is called. And he's singing about this and that, and I feel like there's a cannonball that I'm singing at, and who the hell wrote this song, this line, and it's just terrible. So I kind of get angry about little things like that, and so I just don't have the love for Notebook like I have with the other albums. But
did you get the Cassidy albums too that came out at the same time?
And then they had Cherish, Rock Me Baby. I never really had all the albums. I think I had Cherish as a kid. But Rock Me Baby, I didn't know all these albums were coming out. By 1972, like I said, you couldn't find them, or you heard about it, and you would have to go to the Record World, which was a big record chain near us. And again, it's the peer pressure, cool factor, and you got to find the right guy to ask, and whatever. After a while, it became too much.
72, even though I was around, but I wasn't an adult or anything. Seems like an interesting year. It seems like a year where they did oversaturate Partridge Family, and David Cassidy, but they also oversaturated like the Jackson 5 and the Osmonds and
the Monkees in the same way.
Yeah, it's it was just a weird make or break year, and it's like afterwards for years. Some of them never had a hit again, but some of them didn't have a hit. Like Michael Jackson, that stopped his career cold until like 79 or something.
Till he did Off the Wall.
Yeah. I mean, they had a couple one-off hits like Dancing Machine or something like that, but it was not the same for a long time.
Absolutely. Even like Donny Osmond. I mean, Donny and Marie's the variety show saved them on one level. It made them popular. Yeah. At least that they were around. But as far as the top 40 chart is concerned, sales. Forget it.
Yeah.
Forget it. Yeah. And for some good reason also. But that's another story. That's another podcast. Right. But I love the Partridge Family. I love David Cassidy and all that stuff. And actually coming up this weekend, the 20th, is the 4-year passing of David Cassidy. So it's a little sad to somebody that was a huge part of my life, who gave me a lot of joy, had a very, very difficult life of his own. And that makes me feel kind of sad,
Yeah, I assume you saw him in concert. I never did. So, I mean, David Cassidy.
Yeah, I did. I saw him in concert several times in the 90s, early 90s. He went on tour, and I saw him with the Beach Boys. He opened for the Beach Boys. That was a great concert. And I've seen him several times in the 2000s. Best story about that is that he was doing Harris in Las Vegas. He was doing a show there, and it was very successful. And he had to bring it around to the Harris in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And so I went out there to see that show, and I met up with a whole bunch of other Partridge Family, David Cassidy fans. And it was tremendous. And most of them were all women. So I had a time of my life, hanging out with them, and nothing was happening, but it was just being with them and enjoying the atmosphere of being with them. And so we saw two shows. So the first show, all the girls told me, look, take a seat in the upper area, the general seating area. And the second night, you can sit with us at the table at the stage. So I figured it was like two different experiences, because the first time you're watching the whole thing and you're watching David, but you're also just watching the fans. You're watching the crowd. And I just thought that was really cool. And the second time I was in it, I was in the show. And I got to, it was incredible. And he was terrific. He was terrific. He shook my hand. And I've seen him in concert several times since then. And the last time was his last show at BB King's in 2017.
Did he? I mean, you said that one story about he'd give a long dissertation of how much he hated the particular song. But in general, do you think he resented all those Partridge Family songs, or did he enjoy performing them, or a little both?
I think he came to appreciate. First of all, he appreciated the songwriting for those songs that were really good. The Tony Romeo's songs in particular. He wrote "I Think I Love You." He wrote "Yes, Love." It's one of those nights. Okay. Right. He wrote "Point Me in the Direction of Albuquerque." He wrote some of the really great songs that are on there in the catalog. "Summer Days" is another one. So he would talk about that, but it just overall, I don't think he and the producer Wes Farrell saw eye to eye. David wanted to have a greater voice in how the records were made, and Farrell was, hey, I'm in charge here. You're just a kid, and so he resented that, and he didn't like the so busy talking in the middle of the song. I guess he figured that was just not cool or whatever. And I think David suffers from some of the same things that I suffered from, as far as, worrying about the cool factor too much, or whatever,
Yeah. I mean, I actually would follow David Cassidy's career, even though I wasn't a huge fan. Like, this was actually posted the other night because I think it's the anniversary of it. And you may have seen this at the time, the Partridge Family, My Three Sons reunion.
Yes.
It was this day in 1977, I believe, that it.
That's right.
Yeah. And I watched it because I was kind of curious, and I didn't realize, wow, it just seemed like the show was still on the air, because it's still in reruns in 77. It's like, wow, they grew up to be big people. I'm still a little kid because they're all a little bit older than me. So it's like, it's like, oh, because when you're a kid, anybody that's like 1 or 2 years older just seems big, compared to yourself,
Right. No, that was a big show. I remember I enjoyed that. I was thrilled. David had his own spot in the show when he sang, and I don't remember what it was. But my in looking back on it now, I've also become a huge My Three Sons fan.
Yeah.
And of course I was when I was a young kid, again, watching it on reruns.
Right.
And there were actually 4 or 5 sons, because there were 3 sons originally. Then one got married, and then they brought in Ernie. So I guess there were a total of 4.
Right.
And I don't know if
I think the oldest son had triplets or something.
Yes, one of them had triplets, right?
Yeah.
And so just a matter of, I don't know if they were taking into account all the four sons
Yeah.
in the 1977 reunion.
Yeah.
These are the little things that become very important to me when I become obsessed about stuff like that.
Yeah. I would love to see it again. I think I remember Susan Day was not on it,
That's
and I
right.
don't think she's ever appeared in any sort of reunion thing.
The only thing she's ever done with the Partridge Family is on Saturday Night Live.
Oh.
She took the role, played Laurie Partridge in one of those scenes
Mm.
in which the Partridge Family have a sing off with the Brady Bunch kids. And there was a girl there was a woman on the Saturday Night Live cast that used to play Jan Brady on a regular basis.
Right. That's right.
And so they made that, which was a great scene. It was a lot of fun.
Mm.
And so it was good to see her actually being able to have some fun with. I mean, I think David Cassidy may have some issues about being being Keith Partridge. Susan Day, and I will tell you the Susan Day story in just a minute if you'd like to hear it.
Sure.
A friend of mine and I went to see Susan Day perform in a staged reading of a play in New York. It was some kind of a trial. And so she was doing that. It was just a staged reading. Mm-hmm. And after the reading was over, and it was very nice. It was, it's a good play. Mm-hmm. There was like a wine and cheese afterwards, and you got to meet the cast. Mm-hmm. And so my friend and I, huge Partridge Family fans, were like trying to not be too geeky or whatever. So we figured, we're just going to be cool. We'll shake hands with her and we'll congratulate her. Can't say anything about the Partridge Family, otherwise it'll be gone, right?
Done.
Sure enough. And she and Susan Day couldn't be nicer. She had a nice smile. She was friendly. Shook our hands. She talked to us for a minute or two. And sure enough, I will take the fall. That I said to her, we loved you in the Partridge Family, and then she actually moonwalked or moon ran, pacing backwards away from us as far as she finally could to hide behind her husband. It was hysterical. And so my friend and I, we just, we laugh about that all the time. And oh, good Lord. It's a classic story.
Did you get her autograph or was it too late?
No, I think it was too, we didn't think about that. And what are you going to do?
Yeah, well, so I guess she didn't have the greatest time with it. Oh, well, but, at least she kind of recovered her career with LA Law.
She did.
And stuff, and
she's had a good career.
Redeemed herself and everything. Yeah. So she has nothing to be ashamed of. She's watching this, it's like, hey,
we love you, Susan Day.
Yeah, you were fine, Yeah.
You're
fine,
just a little bit, maybe on the oddball side. That's all I can say.
But hey, and I always thought it was weird, looking back on it, it's like Susan Crowe is already gone from us too, and it's like, wow, it's like, I mean, you expected, Dave Madden to be gone, because he's older and stuff like that. But Shirley Jones is still with us, and
she's with us. Suzanne was a very nice woman, and I was involved. I'm still involved to some degree. Mm-hmm. There's a website called ComeOnGetHappy.com, and it's CMONGET happy.com, and the people that were managing that became friendly with Suzanne Crowe, and she would get on the bulletin board, and they had a certain chat room they put up, and she would come on every so often and she would chat with the fans. And it was just a wonderful thing to be able to experience. And so and she was very friendly. We even emailing now and again, I do an email with her, and so I thought she was very friendly, very nice woman. And she was in a regular job by that point. She was managing a famous footwear or one of those kind of sneaker shoe stores or whatever. And I don't know if she was what level of management she was at, but whatever, that's what she was doing. And so she was a real person. And so to lose her so very young, it was tragic.
Out of all of them, Shirley Jones is the only one I ever met.
Did you?
She did a talk at the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco about 10 years ago, I guess. And she did talk about the Partridge Family. She's more there to talk about Elmer Gantry because this is on the anniversary of the film. So that would
Right.
probably tell you what year it was. Like the 60th anniversary or 50th anniversary of it, I think.
So that would have been 2012 then.
Okay. Yeah, so
Or
that's when I
something like
saw her.
that. Yeah.
And unfortunately didn't get her autograph, but that's okay. But got like front row seats, so she was like, as close as my computer is, almost is like, so it
Yeah.
was really cool. And she's very elegant, very nice. And she did talk about the Partridge Family, and she's very funny and everything, saying, it's like, I wish I could be on the songs more, but they mixed me out on those records,
Yes. Yes.
you know? And but she said she had a blast doing them and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
she knew it was really David's baby, as it were. She was just
Well,
kind of,
they were very interesting as how the records were made.
yeah,
As far as recording the records, David Cassidy and Shirley Jones were the only ones from the cast that recorded on them.
right.
But they, as she indicated, on the records themselves, she was mixed very low, and there were background singers who were originally signed to do all the records for the Partridge Family. So
Right.
you had Tom and John Baer, their
Mhm.
brothers, Ron Hicklin, and Jackie Ward. And those were the singers that did the records. So Jackie would sing the Shirley Jones and the Susan Day parts, and so they would mix her higher on the actual records. And then when they did the mix for the TV show, they
Mhm.
would mix Shirley Jones's vocals a little higher, not
Mhm.
dramatically higher, but
Right.
I don't think. But so
Well,
this
certainly when
way,
she was on screen, you
yeah.
could, because obviously she's singing that want to make you sound like you're listening to her, I guess. Yeah.
I know, but the funny thing is that they put so much work into these records. I mean, they were really solid records that
Mhm.
you would think that someone who's a professional like Shirley Jones, that they would have maybe worked with her a little bit and said, you know what, we really would like to put you on the records more.
Yeah.
Maybe put you in the sound and even give you your own solo song
Yeah.
maybe every other album or something like
Yeah.
that.
I'm
Because
surprised they didn't
granted,
do
the
that.
kid,
Yeah. Wasn't
granted,
that just the Christmas album? Didn't she get a
only on the
solo?
Christmas album
Yeah.
does she
Yeah.
have actual vocals on there.
Yeah.
They did there's a story, an episode in I think the second season
Mhm.
where it's an ecological episode, where they're trying to save whales, the humpback whale.
Oh yeah.
And so they record a song about called the whale song.
Yeah.
And they make that as part of the episode, and Shirley
Right.
Jones or Shirley Partridge sings the song. Never ever thought to release it. I mean,
Yeah.
you think that this was the ecological time.
Yeah.
This was something that would have been a hit record if they
Right.
had the brains to put it out, and
Yeah.
it might have given the Partridge Family even a tiny bit of credibility,
Yeah.
and people at Bell Records never thought about it. And so it's just one of the dark marks on
Yeah.
Bell Records as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I found it weird on Partridge Family and researching it, and I got the books about the TV series and the collectibles and everything like that. That there were songs that just were never released, at least back in the day. I mean, they've released some of them since, and of course, you can get all the DVDs now, so have all the songs. But the fact that there's that song called "Together" that they sing like 3 or 4 times in the first few episodes. Not on the first album, not on
No,
any album,
no,
and it's like, wow, because it wasn't the best song in the world, but it's memorable, it's catchy enough,
right,
and it's like,
right.
could have put it on the first album,
It
why
could have
not?
been on the first album. It should have
Yeah,
been on the first album.
yeah,
It was originally initially released on a Partridge Family Greatest Hits CD, maybe 20 years ago.
right, right. And then,
Um,
the two theme songs, is When We're Singing and then Come On Get Happy, essentially the same song with different lyrics, but I don't think those made it on the records, if I remember correctly,
no,
originally
not
either.
at all, not at
You know,
all. And Come On Get Happy was also put on Greatest Hits, several
yeah,
Greatest Hits CDs, but not when we're singing.
yeah. And
Uh,
it just seems like that would have been an obvious hit. Of course, they never put out Theme from the Monkees as a single, but it seems
right.
like that would have been an obvious hit too. I mean, I think it was in a couple other countries, but not in America at least. So
Yeah,
that's where
yeah,
so
right.
um interesting marketing on all this stuff.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. Now, this just came to me, but we were talking about all these other groups. Were you ever an Archie's fan, or did that not that pass you by.
So the Archies were part of that early influence.
Yeah.
From the the all the bubblegum type records
Yeah.
that came out. The Rondante Archies, but he also had, what was it? Come on. No, well, Little Willie Willie came a little bit later on. That was somebody else, I think.
Oh, you mean other
Oh,
records that were like Banana Splits or
Banana Splits. I
yeah,
listened to
and
some of that.
even the
I'm
Hardy
trying to.
Boys, Groovy Ghoulies, all those Saturday morning shows.
Right, right. Groovy Ghoul, and that was past me, so I wasn't
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
But Jesus. Oh, excuse me. I apologize. I shouldn't say that on
That's okay.
whatever.
And then of course
It'll come to
Chipmunks
me when I'm
because
gonna make it off.
of course the Chipmunks Alvin show and everything they were actually the precursors of all this stuff in a certain
Right. Well, of
respect.
course. Right. The Chipmunks record. Right. And of course the Christmas record is famous.
Mm-hmm.
That's all part of it. There was oh my God, I can't think of the 1969. And of course Build Me Up Buttercup is my favorite record from that period. 1969. I can't think of the darn song. But anyway, hell, I'm 61 years old. What am I gonna do? It comes and it goes sometimes.
Well, I mean, we're talking about Sugar Sugar. Is that what you're meaning, or
Well,
just
Sugar was a huge hit. I remember that. I remember enjoying the Archies and watching the Archies TV show.
Mhm.
And then I think there was another one that was another hit. But I can't remember the name of that one right now. But
Oh, Bang!
I enjoy Jingle Jangle. Was it? I think
Yeah,
it was something
Jingle
like that.
Jangle and Bang Shangalang. And
Yeah, Bang
yeah,
Strangalanger, and there's something. I mean, I like their stuff, and I always
yeah,
like that sound.
yeah,
Anything from where I heard from any other group, I always kind of went with that type of sound. So I love the bubblegum sound.
yeah,
I liked the Bugaloos.
yeah.
Remember the
That's
Bugaloos? I mean, I
yeah,
thought that was the greatest thing.
yeah. Well,
You know,
the other one, HR Puffin stuff, they put out
it's all puffing
a
stuff.
mini
Sure.
album at least, and then another one, Josie and the Pussycats.
I like Josie and the Pussycats.
What else? They
The West
tried with
End.
things like Pebbles and Bam Bam, didn't work.
No.
And
Although I'll tell you one thing, that one song, um, when she the song they put at the end of the Flintstone episodes.
put love in
When
your heart or
daddies
something.
never fight and mommies never win. Da, da, da. Oh my God, I can't think of that one now either. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, see, I
Well,
should
all
have
these
prepared
bubblegum
myself for all
stuff,
this
this
stuff.
stuff isn't all winners. I mean, it's like,
Let the sun shine in.
you
Da, 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 da. Yeah, it's great stuff.
know. But I never knew, when all that stuff came out, how records were marketed or anything. I mean,
Yeah,
because it's so
yeah.
bizarre, like I said, to have a record on the back of the cereal box and you just cut it out and play it,
Tracy by the Cufflinks. That's the
Oh,
other
yeah,
Ron Dante song
yeah,
that I
yeah,
absolutely loved.
yeah,
That's it. Tracy, bum ba ba ba,
yeah,
bum ba. Sing along, bum ba ba ba
yeah.
ba ba ba. Great stuff, man.
And if
Great
you
stuff.
if you go into archives, we did interview Ron Dante, Charles Rosenet and I, and he
Hmm.
does talk about that. And we were talking about him mainly because he's currently on tour with the Turtles,
That's right.
and he says, "Yeah, Tracy was my attempt to do like a Happy Together because it has the ba 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 ba
Right,
type
right.
stuff in it." He says, "I don't know if it quite came off, but it was kind of memorable." And I
Yeah.
don't know if you got Ron Dante's Funhouse, a 2-disc set that has just like various odds and ends. It has a lot of Archie stuff, but it has stuff like from him doing the Chan Clan from Charlie Chan Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and even some ads for like Kent cigarettes and stuff. It's a really interesting compilation of just
I'll have to
bizarre.
look to see if it's on Spotify. I do a lot of
It's just
Spotify
some weird
nowadays.
Ron Dante
Yeah.
compilation, but it has a cover by Dan Parent, who's an Archie artist currently, and so it has that total Archie vibe. even though it's not called the Archies. But I mean, it's
Hmm.
like, yeah, you could tell, because it's called Funhouse, obviously, and it even has the Archie's TV Funhouse theme song, which was never released as record before and stuff like that. So
So does
yeah,
Ron Dante have access to the name Archie's, or is that something he's?
he has more access to it than he used to. I'll put it that way. It's not like he owns it. I mean, the Archie family, or the family that always has owned Archie, still owns it, but they understand Ron Dante's importance, so he gets to work with that name and perform under that
Mhm.
name. So he
Yeah,
has. Whereas, yeah, he used to get in trouble for doing that. You can't perform on under the Archie's name. He'd still perform, but
crazy.
he would just perform as Ron Dante. Maybe
Well, just like with the
as the
Monkees.
Archies.
I mean, the
It's like,
Monkees, the Monkees would go out on tour. They couldn't use their logo.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
who the hell
yeah.
comes up with this stuff?
So
You know, you,
it was a similar situation like that. I
yeah,
think now Archie Publications, they love it because it's free publicity. They didn't see it that way back in the day, but now they do. So
yeah,
they're happy with Ron. Um, and I think they've since reissued all the albums with their original covers and configurations and everything. Whereas for the longest time, like a couple of the albums were released as Ron Dante albums, even though they were actually Archie's albums.
yeah,
It was, and they gave it a different name. It was like Ron Dante Sugar Sugar, which was not the original name of that album.
yeah. Right,
A
right,
Ron
right.
Dante Jingle Jangle, and it's like, well, that wasn't the name of that album either, But they, like I said, they've since come to an agreement over such
That's
things,
good.
which is
I
good.
became more aware of Ron Dante uh, through Barry Manilow
Yeah, I was going to ask
because
you
he
about
was
that because yeah,
co-producing. He co-produced Barry Manilow's first 6 or 7 albums,
yeah,
and so I was impressed with the way those records were made.
hmm,
And then I looked him up, and I realized he was the voice of the Archies.
yeah,
And I was like, oh wow, so he goes back to that, and then he made this, and he did that, and he
yeah,
produced, and so I was like, wow. So all these things kind of just go into the same group. Manilow, Tony Orlando was
mhm,
originally, I think he originally produced or whatever. He was involved with Manilow's first record,
hmm,
and he rearranged Manilow's great song "Could It Be Magic" into
mhm,
some kind of a more up tempo song, and rearranged the words and so forth. And it's a passable
mhm.
record, I mean, that Tony Orlando could have made back then if he had wanted to, or whatever. And of course, Manilow's version is so much better. And then what? But at the same time, Donna Summer made it into a great disco record.
Right,
So it's just, it's just hysterical.
yeah,
Here we were, this my precious Chopin prelude and all this kind of stuff, and we can't have this other thing. And then, 6 months later, Donna Summer comes out with her version of it. So
yeah. And I didn't even know that at first, and then I figured it out. Uh, I always have the. I think this is a funny story too, and this, I'm sure. It's like Barry Manilow sings "I Write the Songs," and it wasn't written by him, and it's written by Bruce Johnston of the Beach
right.
Boys. So
Well, here's the thing about that song that drives infuriates me to this
yeah,
day. I mean, that number one, the fact that nobody understands the fact that Barry did not write the song, or they think that he wrote the song, and yeah, Bruce Johnston should get the credit, and
right,
Johnston has done quite a bit. Johnston's solo work really should be given a bit more um, promotion,
yeah,
or whatever,
Bru-
marketed, whatever, because I don't know, somehow I think he kind of gets the short end of the stick with the Beach Boys. I think that if you listen to the Sail On podcast,
hmm,
there's an early episode in there where they go through a lot of the early Bruce Johnston stuff,
hmm,
and so you might want to listen to that
yeah,
and just hear his some of that stuff.
yeah,
I think he's quite good. But anyway, the thing with that ties all this in together, Barry Manilow and was on Arista Records, with Clive Davis being the CEO of Clive of Arista Records. Arista Records is born out of Bell Records,
right,
right? Because Clive Davis bought Bell Records, then he assumed the CEO's position. He got rid of most of the artists from Bell Records. David Cassidy was kept on for a little while, and then he moved over to RCA.
yeah,
So, and while David was with RCA, he gets the song "I Write the Songs" because he was working with Bruce Johnston and Carl Wilson on one of his solo albums.
Mm-hmm.
So Bruce Johnston gives him "I Write the Songs,"
Mm-hmm.
and he records "I Write the Songs" arranged by Bruce Johnston, and he records his song. And sure as heck, Clive Davis must have given the demo that David Cassidy made to Barry Manilow and said, "You're the one that can make a hit record out of this."
Hmm.
And it just seems to me that David Cassidy kind of got screwed on that, and that drives me up the wall. And then 10 years later, David Cassidy makes a record for Arista under the UK label only. It's a terrific record called Romance. Never ever saw it in the US, never went anywhere. And you know that Clive Davis must have had a hand in that too. So he's not one of my favorite people.
I wonder why I hated David Cassidy so much, but I don't know. Just as an aside, which is kind of funny, it's interesting when, you know, I don't know if that I Write the Songs is considered Barry Manilow's biggest hits, but it is a big hit. And you know, it just reminds me of, it's just funny when songwriters don't have their biggest hit be a song they've written. An example would be Harry Nilsson. You know, he wrote songs for Monkees and everybody.
Yeah.
Yet his biggest hit is Without You, written by Badfinger. So it's like, go figure.
Really? I did not know that. I thought he wrote that.
No. So it's written by Tom Evans and who's the other guy? Peter Ham.
Okay.
Badfinger. And it was on the Badfinger album called No Dice. And their version isn't bad, but you know, when they sing it, they kind of go, "Can't live if living without you, can't live," you know. And then it's Nilsson who sold it when he goes, "Can't live." You know?
Oh, it's a great record. Great record.
So, you know, I get it, but it's just kind of sad in a certain way that Nilsson, he did have a couple hits, like he wrote Coconut, he wrote Me and My Arrow, but you know, even Everybody's Talking, he didn't write that one. That's a big hit too, you know. And it's like, you know, it's like for someone who had big hits for other people, like One by Three Dog Night or Cuddly Toy by the Monkees or something.
He wrote
like that.
One, huh? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he
One
couldn't
is one of my
catch a
favorite
break for
records of all time.
himself. You know, it's gonna.
I love One. Yeah.
Yeah. So
1969.
I'm a big Harry Nilsson fan, so it's like kind of you know, you probably would be too if you explored him a little further. You say, "Oh, he has some pretty good stuff," especially if you get his mid '60s to early '70s stuff, like '67 to '74. After that, he kind of peters off, but you know, that little window.
Well, the album with Lennon, I don't think worked out all that well.
But that's where it cuts off. You know, he did a couple okay things after that, but his voice was shot. He lost it on the Pussycats album, and you know, the only thing interesting about the Pussycats album is that Lennon's on the cover and he produced it. Other than that, it's like, you know, Nilsson's voice, you just go, oh. Because
I really
should. This album called a Little Touch of Nilsson in the Night. And it's the same as what is commonplace now. Linda Ronstadt's done it, Rod Stewart's done it, where you do the American Songbook. But Nilsson did it back in '73. Well, Ringo did it before that with Sentimental Journey.
Sentimental Journey.
Nobody cared back then. They said, "Why are they singing this old crap?" Now it's commonplace to sing. And then McCartney finally did one with Kisses on the Bottom. Same type of thing. You know, it's like, but back when Nilsson did it, you know, if you ever listen to the documentary of, there's a good documentary about Nilsson, and who is I can't think of his name. Who is the producer of Ringo's two biggest albums?
Okay, hold on. I know who you're thinking about. I can't look it up right now because I can't move around on my computer. It'll come to me.
I don't know why I'm blanking on him. But he produced the Pointer Sisters years later. He did the two biggest Harry Nilsson albums, and so when Nilsson had a big hit with Nilsson Schmielsen, which had Without You, he said, "All right, that's your Revolver. Your next album, Son of Schmielsen, is going to be your Sgt. Pepper." Nilsson thought otherwise. Even though there's good stuff on Son of Schmielsen, it's like he drops the F-bomb on the record.
That's too bad.
And then after that, he goes, "All right, well, you got that out of your system. Now let's make your Sgt. Pepper." And Nilsson says, nah, I want to do a standards album. And it's like, what? No, no, you don't want to do a standards album now. You save that till you're older. You do a good pop rock album right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah,
that's when they
yeah.
parted ways. He got Derek Taylor to produce that album. And, it's actually a really good album. But, in
Yeah.
retrospect, you go, Nielsen was right because he lost his voice after that. But, you know, they wouldn't have known that at the
Yeah.
time.
Richard Perry is who you're talking
Richard
about.
Perry, thank you very
Yes.
much. For
Yeah.
some reason, I was saying Phil Spector, no, no,
Yeah. I
Paul
just had to
Ramon,
think.
no, no.
I'm trying to read the back of the album in my head.
Yeah, Richard Perry, yes. And Richard Perry wrote his autobiography in recent times, and he talks about that very thing. And the amazing thing about Richard Perry is he knew how to make a good album appropriate for a person, and when they stopped using him, the careers went like that. It's
Yeah.
like he did it with Tiny Tim. Tiny Tim
Yeah.
has an excellent album that suits his personality. Did it with Ringo and Goodnight Vienna. Did it with Nielsen Schmielsen and son of Schmielsen, and then afterward, nothing, because they're very kind of eccentric type of performers that need like a certain type of production style, you
Yeah.
know, to make it work. I always thought, when Ringo was really dying in the late 70s, and even more recently after Mark Hudson, I said, why doesn't he reconnect with Richard Perry just
Yeah.
once, and
Yeah.
just make one more great album? But now they're all getting kind of long in the tooth, so who knows?
Yeah.
Probably the
Well,
magic probably wouldn't return, but
I was listening to that talk podcast,
yeah,
and there was an episode on Ringo Starr. I'm
yeah,
not sure what the particular episode is, but they talk about the change in producer and why he left Richard Perry. They had some kind of a falling out, from what I
yeah.
understand.
And
But
I've heard that
and it's
too,
just
but
the
I don't
way it
know the
goes.
details,
No.
unless Richard Perry talks about his autobiography, because
Yeah.
on the Nielsen documentary, he only really talks about his relationship with Harry Nielsen. And only his connection to Ringo was that Ringo was on Harry's sessions, and Harry was on Ringo's sessions. But other than
Yeah.
that, he didn't talk about any falling out with Ringo. He just talked about a falling out with Harry. So
Because it doesn't pay for him to say that he
yeah,
had falling out with Ringo Starr.
yeah. So, but I mean, he was a good producer.
Yeah.
He's probably, I think he's just retired now. But I mean, he did all the big hits the Pointer Sisters had for years. And any song that by the Pointer Sisters, he probably did, unless it was one of their early ones like Salt Peanuts or Can You Can or whatever it's called. It's
Sure.
like, but any of the big ones, He's So Shy,
Mm-hmm.
Neutron Dance, Jump for My Love or whatever it is.
Jump for
All
My
those,
Love was a big
yeah,
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, all those ones, all produced by Richard Perry. Yeah, so
And the Pointer Sisters won the Carol Burnett show virtually every week.
yeah,
She must have been her favorite group.
yeah. And that's another thing you said you're interested in. I looked you up, and you mentioned the
Oh no.
Mets, and but also you're interested in Carol Burnett, and you're interested in the Honeymooners. So you see, I found out some things
Thank you.
about you.
Oh no. Gotta be careful what you put on Facebook. But yeah, I love the Honeymooners. Honeymooners. My father and I connected on the Honeymooners when I was a kid,
Mhm.
and so I've enjoyed that for years, and I've enjoyed all kinds of variety shows, Sonny and Cher,
Yeah.
and then the Carol Burnett is just genius. They're
Yes.
just you know
I try
absolutely.
to get as many episodes. Like I just finally got this set. I don't know why I skipped it over the years. Dean Martin show. It was like 6 disc set, and it has like episode, just random ones, but at least they're complete episodes.
Yeah.
A few months ago, I got a 5 disc set of Cher, her solo series between the two Sonny and Cher shows.
Okay.
And I remember that from back in the day. And yeah, I got all the laugh-ins. I got
What about what about the Sonny Bono comedy review?
I would love to have even one episode of that, because I honestly don't think I ever saw it when it came on. And I was looking at the schedule, and I can't even remember. I think they put it against some show I watched. I don't
Yeah.
remember. I'd have
I
to look
was
it up.
such a huge fan of Sonny and Cher. I
Yeah.
was so broken up when they broke up.
Yeah.
I refused to watch the Cher show, although I did eventually
Oh,
watch it.
oh,
And I was so angry with Cher. And nowadays I'm more angry with Sonny Bono for the way she was treated. And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
unbelievable the crap
No,
that goes on.
I mean, I watched the Sonny and Cher comedy hour the whole time it was on, and it was sad they divorced and everything. Didn't know all the background story. I had no clue and didn't even know until like years later that Sonny had the Sonny Comedy Review. It's like, when was that on? It's only
Yeah.
on like
3
13 weeks.
weeks, maybe, if it was 3 weeks,
But
Yeah.
but I remember the Cher show really well, and so I got,
Yeah.
and apparently they're both broadcast the same night, just on different networks. So I must have been watching something else, and by the time Cher came on, that show was canceled too. I don't know what, or I
Yeah.
was just that much of a fan of Cher. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was actually kind of disappointed when they reunited as Sonny and Cher again, even though I
It
was
was very
upset when they
awkward.
separated,
Yeah.
you know,
It was
because the later Sonny and Cher show wasn't as good, and so I was like, it's like,
it felt kind of flat. I mean,
yeah,
I still kind of enjoyed it, but it was like nostalgia for me,
yeah,
early nostalgia for me. I was
yeah,
only 16, but whatever, something along those lines.
yeah,
But my sister Nancy was the one that was my big influence on music and virtually my whole life, actually.
yeah.
She's the one that took me to see Sonny and Cher at
Hmm,
Nassau Coliseum,
that's cool.
1971. And so I got to see them during their prime, when then their TV series.
Hmm,
And I wanted to ask you, talk about comedy.
yeah.
I was a big fan also of crap from Young Frankenstein,
Oh, Marty Feldman.
Marty
Yeah.
Feldman, Marty Feldman's Comedy Machine.
Yes.
And so we
I
used to
saw
watch
that
that
when it
all the
was
time. Yeah,
originally
I
on. My
loved
dad
that.
actually let me stay up because, for me, TV shows, this is kind of funny before, you say what you're going to say, is people always say, "Oh, that show was too violent," or "That show was too sexy." My parents would let me watch anything as long as it wasn't on too late. And then they'd make exceptions for certain things.
Hmm.
And so that was one of them. It was the Marty Feldman Comedy Machine. And I was upset a few years ago. They were going to put it out on DVD, and then some sort of rights issue has
Uh,
kept it off of DVD. It was going to be the complete series. I was like, yes. And so I'm still waiting. I doubt it'll ever come out, at
I'd
least
have to look to
anytime.
see if it's on YouTube
They
in
have
any
bits of
way.
it on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
So I thought
it's
he was
funny. I
so
did
funny.
find ones. I didn't, I was like 5 years old or 4 years old when that originally aired. And the one that stuck in my mind, and it is on YouTube, but this shows you how the memory works, is this one where Marty Feldman's wife is like asleep in the bed, or I forgot. I've watched it in recent times, I forgot, or she's just jabbering away. It's almost like a Benny Hill thing. And she goes to sleep, and he gets in his little mini car, as like a Volkswagen or something, and then he flies on a jet, and he goes off to this like deserted island, and he's with this sexy girl, and they start making out. And then he looks at his watch, and he gets on the
He's gonna
plane, and
get
they show
back.
this footage of the car, and he gets back home, and the wife is, still
Still
just
jabbering
jabbering
on.
away, not notice that he left. Yes, dear, yes, dear. And I think they did, like I said, I think they did it on Benny Hill too, but they did do it on
Yeah.
Marty Feldman, and I just remembered it all this year. It's just that high speed stuff, and so, yeah, that primed me for Monty Python, even though it was already on the air in England. I never saw it until years later.
Yeah, it came
So
up a little bit late. I think I got into Monty Python after I saw the movies. I mean, my mother would jumped up and down over the Life of Brian, and that
yeah.
was we were never allowed to see anything remotely close to Monty Python because of that, because we're Catholic,
Oh,
and so
okay.
that was nuts. So,
Okay.
and then years later, as we'd be able to be a bit more junior high or high school, all of a
Mm,
sudden Monty Python became the thing.
yeah.
And
No,
so I enjoyed that.
like I said, my parents didn't care about that. I mean, there's some nudity in Monty Python, and my parents didn't care that I would see that. They were more concerned that it was on at 10 p.m. So, it
Oh,
was a
okay.
special treat if I got to stay up to watch
Yeah.
Monty Python.
And if you
You
did your
know,
homework.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And like I said, and if they did show a little bit of nipple or something like that, my parents
Yeah.
didn't go like that. They just
Yeah.
said, it's just Mark. He's growing up. He'll learn it soon enough.
Right.
you
Right.
know.
That's it.
Life of Brian. We we grew up, going to church. We weren't Catholic or Protestant, but the only thing my parents did on that film is that they went to see it first. But I think
Mhm.
they went to see it first just as a date. They weren't censoring it for us kids. And then like a week later, I got to see it with my mom or something like that. And the only thing my mom, and she told me after the fact, the only thing she was kind of semi concerned with is there's one scene. Oh, here's my dog. One scene with full frontal nudity, both male and female. And it's like my mom after I saw Life of Brian, she says, "Is that of any concern to you, one way or the other?" And yeah, it's nudity. I don't care. So okay, just checking. If there is, if like I was traumatized because I saw
Yeah. I don't
male
know.
or female frontal nudity, and it's like, yeah.
Right. What are
So
you gonna do?
yeah.
What about Steve Martin?
Oh
Were you
yeah.
a fan of Steve
Oh
Martin?
yeah. I had the first album memorized. I probably still could do it.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's not that great of an album in a certain respect, for being. It's just an album of its time, but I find it hysterically funny, but I can see why people wouldn't,
Yeah.
because and if you ever saw or read, sorry, read,
It's cute.
this is Lulu. If you ever saw or read Steve Martin's biography about his stand-up years that he put out a few years ago, he kind of hits the nail on the head of what he calls non-comedy. He would do this stuff that it didn't really have a punchline. And then it got to the point where he was like the Beatles or David Cassidy or any of the people we've been talking about, where he didn't even have to say anything. He'd just be out on stage and just people would just cheer endlessly. And it's like,
Right.
I mean, for a while he loved it, and then it got on his nerves, and that's why he had to quit. And so he did. And he
Yeah.
basically just in 1981, just, I'm done, and
Yeah.
didn't tell anybody. He fulfilled all his commitments he had at the time,
Yeah.
and he just stopped. He didn't tell anybody he stopped. He just stopped,
And I
and
find it amazing that you can stop
yeah,
because here's this guy. He's been doing comedy, writing, and so forth all these years, and finally he makes it huge with the
yeah,
Let's Get Small that record, and then Wild and Crazy Guy. And
yeah,
I think the next one was Comedy is pretty, that's not
yeah,
so hot. But
yeah,
I thought those first two albums were terrific. I Like
yeah,
Yourself, I had memorized them. And I loved them. I loved the first one because it was more intimate.
yeah,
He was very him in the audience, and he was
yeah,
really wasn't, like I said, trying to tell jokes. He
yeah,
was just telling these whatever observations. I wouldn't even call them
yeah,
observations or whatever, but it was this. For the second was a bit more high tech. It was
yeah,
more,
yeah,
the huge audience, the huge stadiums or whatever, and it was, whatever the song was. I forget what it was. King Tut, you
King
know.
Tut, yeah,
So I mean, I enjoyed it, and I thought it was good. When he turned around in the '80s, he started making movies.
yeah,
He made that one about Los Angeles. Well, that was great,
yeah,
and so I like more of those kind of things than I did like his the big film that he made about when he was a poor black child growing
oh,
up,
the jerk.
whatever it's called, the jerk. Yeah, I mean
Oh,
that was funny in its own way, but
yeah,
I kind of like his stuff post '85,
yeah.
post
The only thing I
'80s.
didn't like is when he got too much into kind of the schmaltzy stuff, where he's doing too much um father of the bride, parenthood type stuff. And
I'm
then what
sorry, I'm
what
gonna stop you there.
okay, but
I
what I thought was
love those
worse,
movies.
so, and I hope you agree with this, because if you're a Honeymooners fan, maybe even a Bilko fan, is when he did Sergeant Bilko and he did Pink Panther. It's like, why do they get Steve
Killing
Martin to
me.
do these
You're
things?
killing me. Why are you doing this? Talk
Yeah.
about having to fulfill a contract.
Yeah.
I
So
don't
I
know if
mean,
that
it's
was the
like
reason or
that's when
not,
I
but
was
that
like, oh,
I couldn't
Steve, go
touch it.
back to the stand-up, and
Anything.
yeah, yeah,
No, don't do that.
yeah.
So, but
Actually, if you've seen him in recent times, he actually does stand up now, but he does it
okay.
under the guise of playing the banjo. He'll
Yes,
go
he
out
does.
and he'll do comedy material between songs. So he's done it again, but he does it on his own terms. So I'm proud of him for that, that he
Yeah.
actually found a way to fit it into the thing without all the screaming fans,
Yeah.
And
And I like the work he does with Martin Short.
yeah,
I mean, sometimes I don't think it doesn't always hit all the time, but the two of them are just terrific together.
yeah,
And the movie, The Three Amigos, one of the funniest movies of all time.
yeah.
I don't. I mean, I don't. I know that it probably back in 1986 or whenever the heck it came out, it wasn't a huge movie. It
No.
it deserves every raving, every bit of credit that it could possibly
Yeah.
get. It's hysterical.
Although my favorite scene in that movie, I can say my favorite scene in probably any Steve Martin movie. Uh, my favorite scene is when they're thirsty and they're drinking out of their canteens, and the one gets the big glob of just sand and dirt in his.
Yeah.
That's my favorite joke in that one. But there's some good stuff in that.
I like it when they're camping and they sing the song,
Oh, yeah.
and that just
Oh.
the whole thing is just brilliant.
All right.
Martin Short
Actually,
is
it made
great,
me think of one other funny thing.
I love that.
He goes, up here, look up here, up here. Anyway, and they're like, huh, what?
Good stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're on the same wavelength on a lot of stuff. Yeah, Carol Burnett is the favorite. What else? I wasn't into the Honeymooners as much. I wasn't even, I assume you like all the New York type sitcoms. So you like
The Odd Couple. I like all that.
The Odd Couple I always liked.
Mhm.
It took me a while to get into the Honeymooners. And I think a lot of it had to do with, I just thought it was Ralph Cramden just yelling at people. And I said, whatever. And I think it took me a while to get into Sergeant Bilko, because I thought the same type of thing. It's just Phil Silvers yelling at people. I wasn't getting this as a kid, and then later I understood the nuance. And on Jackie Gleason, I kind of got into him more when a local TV station in the 80s played his American Scene magazine, which didn't have the Honeymooners on it at all, but it showed his versatility in playing different characters. And so then I appreciated Gleason's talent, because when he was just going, you got a big mouth and to the moon and all this stuff, I was like, oh.
Well, when we were kids, we used to watch the Jackie Gleason show, which aired, I think it's like 1970, 71.
Yeah.
And so you saw the whole variety bit, and you saw they would do a Honeymooner sketch maybe not every week, but they would do it a bit. But they would do it all the different characters that he played, and that was always fun. I enjoyed it, and I particularly enjoyed the musical episodes of the Honeymooners that they did. There was about 12 episodes of that they did. And talk about earlier comedy. I was never a big fan of Sergeant Bilko. It was a little bit before my time.
Yeah.
I was more into McHale's Navy with Ernest Borgnine. Yeah. And I think his name is Carl Ballantyne. Tim Conway's in that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a brilliant series. And Joe Flynn.
Joe Flynn
who played the
Gavin MacLeod wasn't known, but looking,
and he was in there too.
And then you got a couple people that actually were on Bilko on that show, but
yeah, and it was pretty much interchangeable show. I mean, it's like some other shows where they're pretty much going to just rewrite it as a Navy as opposed to an Army or whatever,
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that. I love Car 54. Where Are You?
Yeah.
Also a New York show.
Yeah. Now, all those ones like that I never saw originally, and it took me years to see them, because I did a recent podcast with this guy named Steve Beverly, who's a television historian, and I was saying in the early 70s, like, other than say I Love Lucy, black and white TV was verboten. They'd show Gilligan's Island, but never the black and white season. They'd show I Dream of Jeannie, but never the black and white season.
Never the black and white season.
And I was saying, Andy Griffith's show, they'd talk about how great of an actor Don Knotts was, and I was like, he's never on the show. I didn't know there was 5 seasons of black and white shows.
Well, I think a lot of that came out of Nick at Night, and then TV Land.
That's when I started seeing
that exposed all those shows. Donna
and then
Reed,
I go,
all of that. Yes,
that's when there's some good stuff. And so I never saw the original Honeymooners. In fact, the first Honeymooners I think I saw, I didn't even see the ones you're talking about, was when they did the reunion movies in the mid 70s.
That's right. Yes.
And I was like, what is this? I don't get it. It's like, ironically, and since we're talking about this, they finally put out the Christmas episode where they do a Christmas Carol parody. Apparently it's never been on home video till this year. It's one of the later Honeymooners. If you like everything Honeymooners, it was made in 1977 or something like that.
I'll have to look into that. Yeah.
It has Audrey Meadows, and it has, I think, Jane Keane.
Jane Keane plays Trixie. Yeah.
And then of course,
Art Carney.
Art Carney.
I mean, I love the Honeymooners also because I had also become a Laurel and Hardy fan.
Oh, cool.
And so I enjoyed that stuff. My friend is a huge Laurel and Hardy fan. And so it just this the development from Laurel and Hardy to the Honeymooners and to the Flintstones and then God knows what. And so so that I could not quote you Laurel and Hardy, but he loved Laurel and Hardy. He loves Laurel and Hardy, and he loves the Marx Brothers. And so these are also like influences that I would have.
Yeah.
But the Honeymooners kind of overrode a lot of stuff. Abbott and Costello to some degree is a little bit silly, I think, at times, but it still has some great routines.
But all that stuff eventually, with home video and everything, made it into my collection. So I have all that stuff. So
cool.
And
very cool.
Whereas before, like using Laurel and Hardy as an example, the only thing you'd ever see is like Babes in Toyland, the March of the Wooden Soldiers.
Right.
It's like, surely they had other movies, don't they play anything? And Abbott and Costello, they might play Meet Frankenstein, and that's about it. And it's like, I never saw any of the other ones, and finally I get to see all of them. And so I like, yes, and I'd see their TV shows sometimes, but it's like, that's the one thing I loved about, especially DVDs, is like everything I finally would want to see has come out, except for the Marty Feldman comedy show. Comedy machine. Anyway.
Someday, right?
Yes.
Like all the Partridge Family music that will never see the light of day because of lawsuits and God knows what. So
but I've at least seen all the episodes, not all the cartoons though. Well, I probably saw them when they originally aired, but I don't know.
Well, I got to talk about Facebook, and what I look at on that is I joined a Hanna-Barbera group, and I was talking to some people, and I don't know who these people are that are on the group or whatever, but they're talking about what about having this show or watching that show. I said, I'm 60 years old. I know I have a lot of things that I do that are probably for my entertainment, but I can't imagine sitting back and watching a full season of Josie and the Pussycats or God knows whatever. I mean, I'll enjoy it from the memories of back in the day, and maybe I'll watch a quick clip here and there, but no, I'm not going to sit there and watch Huckleberry Hound again. I mean, I did when I was 6 years old, but
I have to say, I have to say I have all that stuff, but I haven't watched all of it. I mean, what I do is, I should watch more of it now. Live action TV shows, yes. I mean, I made a point to buy every Andy Griffith show, every fill in the blank show, and for the purposes of seeing every episode, because even if you go home after school every day, for years, you don't necessarily see every episode because sometimes you miss it.
Right.
But these DVDs have everything, and they're uncut for the most part. It's like, finally, I'm going to see everything. So now I can safely say there's a lot of series I've seen every episode of, and I'm happy about it because for years they weren't available or whatever. Like Honeymooners, I said I wasn't a fan, but total fan of the 39, and then there's a few assorted ones around it, but thanks to home video, I could finally see all that stuff,
Right. Yeah. Me too. I still collect the DVDs, even though so much is on streaming. But in fact, it's funny. Just before I logged on, I just picked up an Amazon Fire Stick, and I'm trying to figure out how to get that installed in my computer on my TV. And then I got to figure out how to, because I want to watch the new Brian Wilson documentary, and I want to be able to watch the new Beatles get back on my TV as opposed to the computer. So all these things I got to do.
I'm all set up, and it's like, it's funny, everybody's all, oh, Disney Plus, I'll get it for a day just so I can watch the Beatles. And it's like, well, I'm getting Disney Plus anyway because I'm a Disney fan. So it's like, in fact, I wish there's more old Disney stuff than, more Star Wars, more Marvel comic stuff. I mean, I like that stuff, but I want the
Yeah.
more
I want the
original Disney
classics.
stuff.
Yeah, the classic animated movies and
Yeah.
whatnot.
I mean, they have those, but I want, like friend of mine, Jerry Beck, which you probably heard, animation historian, he's like, where's Misadventures of Merlin Jones and the Monkey's Uncle? Why aren't those on there? And it's true, they're not on there. It's like
Yeah.
they could put them on there. It's like, and I don't know what the reasons for it, thinking, oh well, those are old movies, who cares? But
Yeah.
they have older movies and that on there. It's like they just don't have those two. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just kind of hit and miss on their old Disney stuff. But if you want Marvel stuff, well, every Marvel movie ever made is on there. If you
Of
want
course,
Star
because
Wars
Marvel's
stuff,
hot.
every Star Wars movie ever made is
Yeah,
on
Marvel
there.
is hot.
What?
I have no time for Marvel, but
Yeah.
Marvel is very hot right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
yeah.
I understand why they put it on there, but can you sneak in a few more Disney shows on that?
Yeah.
But anyway, so I already have it. So when Get Back, I'm ready for Get Back. It's just a countdown for when it's for me.
I'm looking
And-
forward to it. I can't wait.
And my wife's all, don't watch it without me, because she actually has to work the day of was it Thanksgiving or the day after? I forgot what day it debuted.
It's the 25th. I think that's a
Yeah.
Thursday. So
Yeah, and she actually has to work that way because she does emergency response. And I go, don't worry, I will watch it again. I
Right,
can tell
of course.
you. And I said Anthology, when it came out, I taped it. I watched it probably 20 times the following year. I got it on tape. I got it on DVD. I've got it on, well, it's not on Blu-ray, but I I will watch it again. Don't trust me. You don't have to worry about that.
Save it to watch it with your wife and have that experience together. What the heck?
Okay, fine.
Give her a point.
And then she'll go, I'm too tired to watch it. It's like, it's 3
I
months
waited a day for you.
Nah, I already told her I'm going to watch it. I already have the book. I have the DVD set. I'm ready.
Go for it.
Anyway, well, we've talked quite a long time. We can always do another show.
I'd love to.
Anything else you want to say, or anything you want to plug? Any websites, podcasts, anything else? People, if they want to get in contact with you, you got the floor.
Well, you got me on Facebook, so you can always look up Ed Rising on Facebook and see my smiling face and scary face, and I'll be happy to chat with you there. I don't have anything to really promote other than the fact that I'm on Plastic EP show like yourself every so often, and we're looking forward to the big 600th episode.
Yep.
And we'll see what's going to be down the road.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Ed, for being on my show, and we'll wrap it up here. And this has been another Fun Ideas podcast, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Mark.